primary motor cortex. Primary motor cortex activate the muscles of the eyes, so eyes move. Right? So we have another region for head rotation. So planning of any rotation that happens in the head is made here. Then this planning goes to the neck region of the primary motor cortex. Then muscles contract. Then we can move our head. Right? We have another region here for hand skills. So any planning for movements of the hand is organized here. Then it is performed by the hand region of the primary motor cortex. Right? So when we have damage in these areas, so damage in Broca's area causes problem talking, problem speaking. So the person is not able to talk fluently. We call this Broca's aphasia. Right? So inability to speak whole words, inability to speak fluently. So this happens if we have damage in Broca's area. Then, if there is damage in the frontal eye field, the eyes are locked and they can't move voluntarily. So the patient is not able to decide about the position of the eyes. The patient cannot move the eyes. Eyes are locked on some objects in the visual scene, right? And the patient is not able to move the eyes. In order to do this, the patient should close the eyes, open it again, then the eyes are fixed on something else, right? So eyes are locked on, actually involuntary or locked on objects. So this happens when we have damage in the frontal eye. If there is damage in hand skill areas, right? So the person is not able to move the hands purposefully for doing a movement. So the patient is able to move the hand involuntarily, right? But actually he or she is not able to do movements of the hand purposely. So we call this condition motor apraxia. For example, you ask the patient to show you how they comb their hairs, right? So the patient knows what you ask them, right? But they cannot show you the way they actually comb their heads, right? So this condition is called motor apraxia. Or you may ask the patient to show you, for example, this. Okay? So they are not able to do this. Right? So if you examine them, there is no problem moving the hands, there is no hypotonia, there is no uncoordination of movements, no paralysis, no weakness. Everything is okay, but when you ask them to do a movement for you, they cannot. Right? So this condition is called apraxia. Because planning of the movement is not made here. The primary motor cortex is intact, so the muscles are not paralyzed, right? So there is no weakness, everything is okay, but planning doesn't happen. Planning, for example, for doing this, right? Okay, so primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, supplementary motor area are important for voluntary movement, for purposeful movement. How they send the signals to the muscles? By way of corticospinal tract. So corticospinal tract originates from the cortex, from these areas: primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, supplementary motor areas, and somatosensory areas. They go down through the actually internal capsule, which is located between the basal ganglion thalamus and basal ganglion caudate nucleus. So we call this area internal capsule. So they go through the internal capsule, they reach the midbrain, they go through peduncles, basic peduncles of the midbrain, then they go through the ventral region of the pons, they pass through the pyramids of the medulla. So here we have medulla, and here we have the spinal cord, right? So when they reach the medulla, most of the fibers go to the opposite side. So we have cross, right? So again, here we have cross. But some of the fibers don't cross. So from here, we have two corticospinal pathways. Part of the corticospinal pathway that is cross is called lateral, but part of the corticospinal tract that doesn't have cross is called ventral corticospinal tract. So corticospinal tract has two parts. Lateral part, so the fibers here are crossed, right? Ventral part, the fibers are uncrossed, right? So here, 80% of fibers cross and they make lateral corticospinal tract, 20% of fibers don't cross, they make ventral corticospinal tract. So the lateral one is related to movements in the distal part of the body, right? The medial one or the ventral one is related to movements in proximal part of the body and axial. So when you voluntarily move your fingers, you are activating your lateral corticospinal tract. When you move your shoulder, or for example, you purposefully, for example, go down like this, okay, or go back, okay, so these movements are controlled by ventral corticospinal tract. They are voluntary because you make decision for that, right? So you move your shoulder on purpose. So this is a voluntary movement. Any voluntary movement originates from the cortex. Which part of the cortex? Motor, primary motor, premotor, supplementary motor. How? Through what pathway? Ventral corticospinal tract for proximal part of the body and axial muscles. Lateral corticospinal tract for distal part, fingers and toes and lips, for example, right? Okay. So another pathway that controls distal part of the body, but is not so precise, so delicate, is called cortico-rubrospinal. Cortico-rubrospinal originates from the cortex, goes to the red nucleus in the midbrain, then goes to the spinal cord. So from cortex to red nucleus, from red nucleus to the spinal cord. So cortex, red nucleus, spinal cord. Right? So branching fibers from corticospinal tract make synapses here. From here, neurons go down and terminate on dorsolateral ventral or on anterior motor neurons. So because they go to lateral division of alpha motor neurons, they are involved in movements of the distal part of the body, fingers, right? But remember that when cortico-rubrospinal tract is activated, fingers actually contract grossly, not so precisely, right? So for discrete movements of the fingers, we need corticospinal tract. For gross movements like this, we can use actually rubrospinal tract, right? So you can imagine a patient with a stroke in cortex. So neurons in the motor cortex are lost. So the patient is not able to move the body voluntarily, right? So after the recovery, with some physiotherapy, for example, right? The patient is able to move the fingers like this. For example, before the injury, he could write, but now he or she is not able to move the fingers precisely, but they can do like this. Okay? So before the injury, They could move the fingers separately and touch the mobile phone, but now they cannot do that, but they can do only this, or this type of touching, right? So this is this gross movement of fingers and hand is controlled by root spinal tract. So you can say that it provides an accessory route for transmission of relatively discrete signals from the motor cortex to the spinal. So this is a function of the cortico-root-spinal system. Any question? No? Shall we go to the next topic? Yes? Okay. The last part in this session, or if you want, we can have quiz. Slides, right? So, okay, we have only 20 minutes. Let's use this 20 minutes, okay? So, we are talking about movement, we are talking about motor system. We have seen reflexes that are coordinated by the spinal cord, right? We have seen postural movements by brainstem centers, and we have seen voluntary movements by motor cortex, right? Now, let's talk about another type of movement that is made in internal organs, not in skeletal muscles, right? So, autonomic nervous system is involved in regulation of arterial blood pressure, GI motility, GI secretion, bladder emptying, sweating, body temperature. So these are some internal actions that happen by autonomic nervous system. So please be quiet. Organs like blood pressure, heart rate, GI movements and secretion, bladder emptying, right? So the general organization of the autonomic nervous system is like this. So we may have top-down control or reflex control. Top-down means some part of the cortex, called limbic cortex, makes some commands. These command signals reach actually spinal cord, brainstem, and hypothalamus. They actually are the origin of the autonomic nervous system. And by way of this autonomic nervous system, they can regulate internal organs function. Right? Another way is visceral reflexes or autonomic reflexes. So some sensory signals are made in the organ. They reach autonomic ganglia, brainstem, or hypothalamus. Right? They cause movements in visceral organs. So similar to all other types of reflexes. So first of all, we have a sensory stimulation. Then we have integration in the center, like spinal cord, brainstem, hypothalamus, right? Then we have a motor signal that goes to the internal organ. Then we'll have changes in the function of that internal organs. Okay, let's compare autonomic nervous system with somatic nervous system. So, you know that in somatic motor system, alpha motor neurons are located in the ventral horn. From the ventral horn, they go to the muscles. They may have branching. Each branch make connection with the muscle fiber. Here, at the contact between the axon and the muscle fiber, we have a synapse, a classical type of synapse. Right? What is released here? Neurotransmitter. Which type of neurotransmitter? Which one? Small molecule. It's a small molecule, but which one exactly is released here?
Gamma.
GABA? No. What causes contraction of the muscles? Acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is released here. It opens some channels. Sodium enters the fiber. It opens some calcium channels. Calcium enters the cell. Actually, and you know what happens after that? Tropomyosin goes out. Troponin is dissociated from myosin and actin, right? So we will have interaction of actin and myosin and then contraction, right? So acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter responsible for contraction of skeletal muscles, right? So now let's see autonomic nervous system. So first of all, neurons originate from intermediolateral zone, not ventral. Intermediolateral. So the second difference is that here we have one neuron, but here we have two neurons, right? So because we have two neurons, we need a synapse between them. This synapse is made in a ganglion, so we need a ganglion. So the third difference is that in the autonomic nervous system, we should have a ganglion between presynaptic, postsynaptic, right? Fourth difference is that here in somatic motor nervous system, we have synapse between the axon and muscle, but here we don't have classical type of synapses. Let's see, axon comes here, it has an enlargement. This enlargement is called varicosity. Inside the varicosity we have vesicles. Vesicles contain neurotransmitters, right? So when action potential reaches here, these neurotransmitters are released. But let's see here, we have several cells here, not only one fiber. We have several cells, right? So neurotransmitter is released. It can bind to several cells. Then, after the varicosity, the axon continues, makes the second varicosity, right? So we have the second varicosity here. Again, when action potential reaches here, neurotransmitter is released, more cells are activated. The axon continues, and then we have the third varicosity, the fourth one, the fifth one, right? So the axon doesn't end at the fiber. It activates some cells, continues. Activates some other cells, continues. Activates other cells, continues. Right? So this way, one fiber may activate several cells, not only one cell. Right? So, what are differences between the somatic nervous system and autonomic nervous system? First of all, the origin. Somatic from ventral horn, autonomic from intermediolateral. Somatic has one cell, autonomic has two cells. In somatic, we don't have ganglia. In autonomic, we have ganglia. In somatic part, we have classical type of synapse. Here, we don't have classical type of synapse. We have varicosities, neurotransmitter release, activate several population of cells. They continue, they path, activates another population. Right? So these are some differences between somatic nervous system and autonomic. So, autonomic nervous system has two parts, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Right? So let's see sympathetic one. I told you it originates from intermediolateral zone of the spinal cord. Which levels? From thoracic 1 to L2. So in the cervical region, we don't have any sympathetic neuron. Right? So from thoracic level 1 to lumbar level 2, we have sympathetic neuron. So in L3, we don't have sympathetic neuron. In sacral region, we don't have sympathetic. So sympathetic neurons originate from this part. They go to a ganglion. I told you they should go to the ganglion. Then they activate postganglionic neuron, right? So where do we have the ganglion? So some of the ganglion are in a structure called sympathetic chain. So let's see, these are some ganglia. They are connected together. They make something like a chain, right? So we call that sympathetic chain. It's located outside the spinal cord, but very close to that, right? Sympathetic chain. So these neurons, preganglionic neurons, originate from intermediolateral zone. They go to this ganglion. In the ganglion, they activate postganglionic neuron that goes to internal organs. Some neurons enter the sympathetic chain, but don't make synapses here. They go out of this and reach other ganglia and make synapses with postganglionic neurons here. So we can say that in the sympathetic nervous system, ganglia are either located in sympathetic chain or outside that we may have other ganglia that are called peripheral ganglia. So sympathetic ganglia are either sympathetic chain or peripheral ganglia, right? So peripheral ganglia include celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, aorticorenal ganglion, right? So these are some anatomic things. From here, postganglionic neuron originate and go to the internal organs. So now let's see here again. Spinal cord, intermediolateral zone, preganglionic neuron. Leaves the spinal cord through ventral root. Then it enters the spinal nerve, but soon it goes out. It goes out and reaches the ganglion in sympathetic chain. In the sympathetic chain, it may make synapse in the same nucleus or in the same ganglion, or it may go up or down and make connections with other ganglion. Sometimes, instead of making synapse in the sympathetic chain, it goes out and reaches peripheral ganglion and makes synapse with postganglionic neuron in peripheral ganglion. Then, peripheral ganglion sends neuron to internal organs. Got this? Okay. So, we have one exception. The exception is adrenal medulla. So, sympathetic neurons first originate from intermediolateral zone. They go to a ganglion. This ganglion is maybe in a sympathetic chain or in a peripheral ganglion, right? Then they activate postganglionic neuron that goes to internal organ. So each internal organ receives fiber through two neurons, right? There is only one exception. Actually, adrenal medulla, the medulla of the adrenal gland. So this part of the body receives neurons directly from intermediolateral zone without any ganglion, right? So it only receives presynaptics. So intermediolateral horn send preganglionic sympathetic fibers to sympathetic chain. They don't make synapse here. They go through splanchnic nerves to adrenal medulla. So they end here, directly activate cells here. So adrenal cortex, adrenal medulla, preganglionic sympathetic neurons from here activate cells directly. What these cells secrete? Epinephrine and norepinephrine hormones. They enter the blood and go to other regions of the body. So parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system originates from brainstem or sacral region of the spinal cord. So sympathetic nervous system originates from T1 to L2, right? But parasympathetic originates from brainstem or sacral region. Again, here we should have two neurons, preganglionic, postganglionic, right? Here we don't have sympathetic change because we were talking about parasympathetic nervous system. So, in the brainstem, preganglionic neurons go to some ganglia that are located in the head and in the neck, right? So, ciliary ganglion, petricopalatal ganglion, submandibular, otic ganglion. Then postganglionic neurons go to the eyes, to glands in the face, and salivary glands in the mouth. Right? Sacral region. Innervate distal part of the colon, bladder, uterus, genital area. Right? So, neurons, sympathetic neurons from the brainstem originate from four nuclei. Edinger Westphal. So fibers from here enter cranial nerve number 3. What is it? Oculomotor. Good. Superior salivatory nucleus that enter cranial nerve number 7. Facial nerve. Inferior salivatory nucleus that enter cranial nerve number 9. Glossopharyngeal. Dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus and nucleus ambiguous enter cranial nerve number 10. Vagus. So parasympathetic fibers are in nerve number 3, nerve number 7, nerve number 9, nerve number 10. Right? So these nerves carry sympathetic neurons. From them, the linear response, superior salivatory, inferior salivatory, dorsal motor nucleus of the vagus, and nucleus ambiguous. Right? Okay, so again, comparison of the neurons in somatic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system, so we have preganglionic, ganglion, and postganglionic, and sympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system has two parts, the nervous part, like this, and preganglionic neurons that go directly to adrenal medulla, and they secrete epinephrine, norepinephrine, dopamine, and other peptides into the blood. So through the blood, they go to the effector organs. Okay, so I think that it's enough. Like to talk about more things for you, like hypothalamus, amygdala, cerebellum, basal ganglia. So we have these in the nervous system, and they are all important. But actually, we didn't have time to cover all of these topics, right? So for your exam, please read notes that I gave you until this slide. Okay? 45. Please focus on the slides and the notes only. You don't need to read the book. Actually, it's voluntary, it's optional. If you want, you can read the books also, right? So, but if you understand the topics, and you can rely on the slides and notes to answer the question, right? But it's optional for you to also read the book. First, you should read this one, because all of the questions in your exam will be from these files, right? So, any question